Hello, everyone. My name is Kendall Hayes. I'm 28 years old, and just a few hours ago, my own mother called me a freeloader who couldn't survive on her own. She said it in front of 50 guests at her anniversary party. My stepfather, Graham Whitaker, didn't miss the chance to add his own comment. "We don't need your cheap gift," he said coldly. "Take it and get out." I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply smiled, lifted the lid of the box I had brought, and showed them exactly what was inside. Since that night, my phone has barely stopped ringing. But I've realized something important. Not every call deserves an answer. Before I tell you how everything unfolded, if you feel this story might be worth hearing, you can take a moment to like and subscribe. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. To understand why I stood in that room holding that box, I need to take you back 12 years, to the day everything in my life began to fall apart. I was 16 when the phone rang. My father, Stephen Hayes, was a construction engineer. We weren't rich, not even close, but he was the kind of man who would work extra shifts just so he could take his family to the beach for a weekend. The kind of father who never missed a school play, a parent-teacher conference, or the little moments most people forget. That Tuesday morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for a work trip. "When I get back," he said, smiling, "we'll visit that college campus you've been talking about. Start thinking about your future, sweetheart." He never came home. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. They told us the impact was immediate. They said he didn't suffer, as if that somehow made it easier. At the funeral, I watched my mother, Nicole Hayes, accept condolences with calm composure. I thought we would grieve together. I was wrong. Within 2 weeks, she had packed up every trace of my father's life into cardboard boxes. His books, his tools, even the watch his own father had given him. She never asked if there was anything I wanted to keep. I learned the reason one evening when I overheard her speaking on the phone. Her voice was quiet, but unmistakably excited. "The insurance money finally came through," she said. "Now I can start over." Start over. As if the 16 years she had spent with my father were nothing more than a rough draft she could tear up and throw away. What I didn't know then, and what took years to fully understand, was that my mother had already met someone else. A man named Graham Whitaker. Later I learned their relationship had begun at least 6 months before my father's accident. My father hadn't even been gone long, and she was already planning her next life. 18 months after the funeral, I found myself standing in a house I had never seen before, in the quiet suburb of Naperville, Illinois, carrying a single suitcase into the smallest room in the house. It had once been a storage space, barely large enough for a bed, with one narrow window. My mother had married Graham Whitaker at a courthouse ceremony. I hadn't even been invited. "It was just paperwork," she told me afterward. "Nothing worth making a big deal about." The house belonged to Graham, a 4-bedroom colonial with a perfect lawn and a 2-car garage. His son, Ethan Whitaker, who was 20 at the time, moved into the large guest room with a private bathroom. I got the converted storage closet. Ethan drove a brand new BMW his father had given him as a graduation present. He was heading to a prestigious university in California, his entire education paid for. Meanwhile, I had to transfer to a new high school during my junior year, leaving behind every friend I had grown up with. When college applications arrived, I finally gathered the courage to ask my mother for help. "Mom," I said carefully, "the school accepted me with a partial scholarship, but I still need about $8,000 a year. Could you—" She didn't even let me finish. "Kendall, your father's insurance money is being used to rebuild this family," she said firmly. "Ethan needs support for his studies. And besides, you're almost 18. It's time you learned how to stand on your own." Across the room, Graham lowered the newspaper he had been pretending to read and gave a thin smile. "This house doesn't support freeloaders," he said. "If you want a degree, earn it yourself. That's how the real world works." I looked at them both. My mother nodded slightly, agreeing with every word he had said. And in that moment, the truth became painfully clear. In their eyes, I was no longer family. I was simply a reminder of a life my mother had already decided to erase. But there was one thing they didn't know, and that secret was about to change everything. The night before my high school graduation, I lay awake in that tiny room, staring at the stained ceiling and calculating the reality of my situation. I had no savings, no family support. My scholarship still left an $8,000 gap each year, and Graham had already made something very clear. I was expected to leave the house the moment I turned 18. That was only 3 weeks away. I had tried everything, working part-time at the mall, tutoring younger students after school, asking my mother again and again for a real conversation about my future. Every time I heard the same answer. We have responsibilities to this family. Kendall, Ethan's education is expensive. You need to learn independence. Independence. As if abandoning me was some kind of life lesson. That night the weight of everything pressed down on me. If I gave up now, I would become exactly what they believed I was, someone who couldn't make it alone. But how do you prove people wrong when you start with nothing? Just as I was drifting into exhaustion, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. The number had a Boston area code. I almost ignored it. It was probably spam or a wrong number. But something made me answer. Kendall? A woman's voice said gently. This is Clara Bennett, your Aunt Clara, Stephen's sister. My heart nearly stopped. Aunt Clara. I hadn't spoken to her since the months after my father's funeral. My mother had cut off all contact with my father's side of the family almost immediately after she remarried. I know your mother doesn't want us talking, Clara continued carefully, but there's something you need to know. She paused for a moment before finishing. Your father left something for you. That weekend, I told my mother I was spending the night at a classmate's house for a study session. Instead, I boarded a bus and took a long overnight trip to Boston. Clara Bennett was waiting for me at the station. The moment I saw her, the resemblance to my father hit me hard. The same gentle eyes, the same way she tilted her head when she listened. For a second, I almost broke down right there on the platform. Thank you for coming, she said softly, wrapping me in a tight hug. I know this couldn't have been easy. Her apartment was small, but it felt warm and lived in. One entire wall was covered with photographs of my father when he was younger, pictures I had never seen before, memories my mother had quietly erased from our home. We sat at her kitchen table, and Clara placed her hands gently over mine. Your mother and I were never close, she admitted. But that's not why I asked you to come. I'm telling you this because Stephen made me promise. She explained that after marrying Nicole, my father had started worrying quietly about the future. Not about love. He loved my mother deeply, but about what might happen to me if something ever went wrong. Your dad didn't trust Nicole with money, Clara said carefully. He saw the way she spent it, the way she prioritized things. He was afraid that if something happened to him, you might be left with nothing, so he prepared for that. I blinked, confused. Prepared how? Clara stood and walked down the hallway. When she returned, she was holding a small wooden box with brass hinges. Your father gave this to me 5 years ago, she said. He made me promise to keep it safe and only give it to you when you truly needed it. She set the box gently on the table between us. I think that time has come. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on worn velvet, was a savings account passbook. Printed across the front was my name, Kendall Hayes. Your father opened this account when you were 3, Clara explained quietly. Every month he added something, sometimes $20, sometimes $50, sometimes more if he picked up extra shifts. I flipped to the last entry, $52,000. The numbers blurred in front of my eyes. For a moment I couldn't breathe. He never told your mother, Clara continued. He was afraid she would find a way to spend it. So he kept the account in your name alone and asked me to keep the documents safe. Under the passbook was an envelope, yellowed with time. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. The same handwriting that had signed my birthday cards, my report cards, every permission slip for every school trip. With shaking fingers, I opened the letter. My dear Kendall, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. But I need you to know that I never stopped trying. Tears blurred the words as I kept reading. I know your mother has her weaknesses. I know she doesn't always put you first. None of that is your fault. It never was. This money belongs to you. Use it to build the life you deserve. And never let anyone convince you that you're not good enough. I've believed in you since the day you were born. The letter ended with 3 simple words. I believe in you. For the first time since my father's funeral, I allowed myself to cry. Not quietly, not politely. I cried the way grief had been demanding for months. Clara kept the original letter. When the day comes that you need proof, she said softly, I'll be here. At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant, but eventually, I would. I returned to Naperville carrying a secret that felt like fire in my chest. My mother was waiting for me when I walked through the door. Her arms were folded, her expression cold. Where were you really? She demanded. You told me you were studying. Mrs. Patterson called looking for her daughter. She said there was no study group this weekend. I set my bag down slowly and met her eyes. I went to see Aunt Clara. The color drained from her face. For a split second, something flashed there. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But it hardened quickly into anger. I told you we don't speak to that side of the family anymore. You told me, I replied calmly. You didn't ask me. This is my house. My rules. Actually, I said quietly, it's Graham's house. The silence between us tightened like a wire ready to snap. A moment later, Graham Whitaker appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. What's going on? She went to Boston, my mother said sharply, to see Stephen's sister. Graham's mouth twisted. The one who couldn't keep her opinions to herself at a wedding she wasn't even invited to. He stepped closer, his tone turning hard. You're living under my roof. That means you follow my rules. And one of those rules is that we don't associate with people who disrespect this family. They are my family, I said firmly. They're my father's family. Your father is dead. The words landed like a slap. My mother said nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't even react. Graham smiled slightly. After graduation, you're out of this house. No negotiations, no extensions. Start figuring out where you're going. I held his gaze without blinking. Don't worry, I said quietly. I already have. Then I walked past both of them, went into my tiny room, and closed the door. 3 weeks. That was all I had left to endure. After that, I would finally be free. Graduation day arrived under a bright June sky, and the seat where my family should have been sitting was empty. I crossed the stage alone, accepted my diploma alone. When the photographer asked if anyone wanted to take pictures with me, I simply shook my head and kept walking. My mother and Graham had more important plans. Ethan Whitaker needed a new car before heading to California for college. Something fast, something impressive. So while I was graduating, they were at a dealership picking it out. That morning, I packed everything I owned, 2 suitcases. That was it. 18 years of my life reduced to 2 rolling bags with space still left inside. Before leaving, I stood for a moment in the cramped storage room that had served as my bedroom. The ceiling was still stained with old watermarks. The narrow window barely let in sunlight. The walls were plain and empty, just the way they had always been because I was never allowed to decorate them. In the kitchen, I left a short note on the counter. Thank you for teaching me exactly who I can depend on. Then I called a cab, rode to the bus station, and bought a one-way ticket to New York City. Clara Bennett had already arranged a tiny studio apartment near the campus where I would start school in the fall. The rent was manageable, the neighborhood was safe, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, I had a door I could close and lock without asking permission. That first night, I sat on the bare mattress watching the lights of Manhattan shimmer through the window. A strange feeling spread through me, something I hadn't experienced in so long it took a moment to recognize it. Freedom, terrifying freedom, but also exhilarating. I had no idea then that I wouldn't speak to my mother for almost a decade. I also didn't know that the next time we met, I would be holding a gift worth more than anything she had ever given me. All I knew in that moment was simple. I had survived, and now it was time to build something. 10 years can feel like a lifetime. During my freshman year, I worked as a waitress at a coffee shop near campus, often juggling 30 hours of work a week between classes. Some nights dinner consisted of day-old pastries and black coffee. If I managed 5 hours of sleep, I considered that a good night. But I never missed a single assignment. By sophomore year, I secured an internship at a small interior design firm in Hudson Square. The pay barely covered subway fare, but the experience was priceless. In 6 months, I learned more than many people learn in years. My supervisor noticed my attention to detail and began trusting me with real design projects. By junior year, word started spreading. Clients occasionally asked for me by name. I began freelancing on the side, transforming cramped apartments into spaces people actually enjoyed living in. My portfolio grew. So did my savings. Senior year arrived faster than I expected. I graduated summa cum laude. 3 design firms offered me positions, and I chose the one with the most opportunity for growth. At 25, I was promoted to lead designer at a respected Manhattan firm. My projects appeared in industry magazines. Clients with 7-figure renovation budgets began requesting me specifically. 2 years later, at 27, I opened my own company, Hayes Design Atelier. It started small, a modest team, a handful of clients. But our reputation grew quickly, and soon we were working on some of the most prestigious addresses in the city. Throughout all of it, I kept my success private. No social media interviews, no public profiles, no reason for certain people to discover what I had become. Clara Bennett was the only person who knew the full story. Over the years, she had become my real family in every sense that mattered. And then there was Julian Cross. I met him at an architecture networking event when I was 26. He was thoughtful, patient, and quietly supportive. He never pushed me to confront my past before I was ready. Meanwhile, my mother never called, not once in 10 years. Soon I would learn exactly why. The invitation arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late September. At first, I nearly threw it away, assuming it was another charity gala announcement that circulated through Manhattan mailing lists. But the return address stopped me. Whitaker Residence, Naperville, Illinois. Inside the envelope was a thick, cream-colored card embossed with silver lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 15th wedding anniversary of Nicole Hayes and Graham Whitaker. 15 years. My mother had been married to that man for 15 years, and this was the first time she had reached out to me. That evening, I called Clara. I received something strange in the mail today. When I explained, she fell silent for a long moment. I've heard a few things, she finally said carefully. Through people who still know the family, Graham's company, Whitaker Building Supply, has been struggling. A failed expansion, layoffs. They've had to cut back. So things are bad enough that people are noticing? I asked. Your mother hasn't been attending as many charity events lately, Clara replied, and I've heard their country club membership might be at risk. I looked down at the invitation resting on my kitchen counter. You think that's why they invited me? I think your mother has never done anything without a reason. She was right. Nicole Hayes had always operated strategically. If she was reaching out after 10 years of silence, it wasn't because she suddenly missed her daughter. It meant she wanted something. What are you going to do? Clara asked. I picked up the invitation again, tracing the raised silver lettering with my thumb. I'm going. You're sure? Not for her, I said quietly. For me. I need to close this chapter. Clara paused. If you need proof of anything, she said, I still have your father's letter. I hadn't forgotten. I never would. In the weeks leading up to the anniversary party, I did something I hadn't expected. I bought a gift. One evening, Julian watched me wrap it at our dining table. The box was covered in deep navy silk paper tied with a silver ribbon. His expression shifted between confusion and concern. You're actually bringing them a present? I know how it sounds. Kendall, those people treated you terribly. They threw you out. 10 years of silence, and now you're buying them a gift? I carefully adjusted the ribbon. This isn't about them, I said. It's about who I want to be. Inside the box rested a single key on a velvet cushion. Beneath it lay the property deed to a quiet two-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. Nothing flashy, just solid, safe, and dignified. The kind of place someone could rebuild their life. Its value was $580,000. Every dollar had been earned the hard way. Late nights, long hours, and years of determination. I wanted to give her a real chance. If she's changed, I told Julian, if even a small part of her regrets what happened, then maybe this could be a new beginning. Julian reached over and took my hand. And if she hasn't changed? Then at least I'll know I tried. He didn't argue. That was one of the things I loved most about him. The night before the party, I slipped a few extra documents into my clutch. A copy of my father's letter, along with records showing the history of the savings account he had opened for me. Proof that everything I had built started with the foundation Stephen Hayes left behind, not stolen, not borrowed. Mine. I hoped I wouldn't need those papers, but life had already taught me an important lesson. Hope and preparation are not the same thing. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was walking into something far worse than I expected. Let me pause for a second here. I'm honestly curious. If you were in my position, would you have gone to that party? Leave a yes in the comments if you would have faced them directly, or no, if you think I should have stayed away. And if you're enjoying the story so far, feel free to hit the like button so I know to keep going. Now, back to that night. The Savoy Park Club in Chicago looked exactly like I remembered from the photos my mother used to post years ago. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings. Tables covered in crisp white linen filled the ballroom. In the corner, a string quartet played softly while guests wandered around with champagne glasses in hand, their laughter echoing across the marble floors. There were about 50 people there. I walked in alone. Conversations slowed, heads turned, whispers followed me through the room. Is that Nicole's daughter? The one who disappeared? I heard she's been struggling, living somewhere in the city, barely getting by. I kept my face calm. My black cocktail dress was simple but clearly expensive, the kind of quiet elegance that people who actually have money recognize instantly. My hair was pulled back into a sleek low bun, and in my hands I carried the navy blue box. I noticed my mother before she noticed me. Nicole Hayes stood at the center of a group of women, gesturing animatedly while her silver anniversary jewelry sparkled beneath the lights. She had aged well, carefully, expensively. Her smile was polished, practiced, the expression of someone who had spent years perfecting a public persona. Then her eyes landed on me. For a brief moment her smile froze. A flash of surprise crossed her face, then calculation, then mild irritation. A second later the mask returned. She didn't approach me. She didn't even wave. She simply gave a small nod, the kind someone might give to a caterer passing by. Kendall. I turned. Behind me stood Ethan Whitaker, holding a champagne glass and wearing a smirk as if we were long-lost friends. Well, look who decided to come back, he said. The prodigal daughter. His eyes traveled from my shoes to my face. Let me guess. You came to ask for help? I met his stare calmly. I came because I received an invitation. Sure you did. He stepped closer. Here's a little advice. Don't embarrass yourself. Nobody here cares about you. I smiled faintly. Then I doubt anyone will mind if I stay. Ethan hadn't changed much. 32 years old and still drifting through life on his father's money, whatever remained of it. I had done my research. His expensive degree in California had led nowhere. A few vague consulting jobs had come and gone before he returned home to work for Whitaker Building Supply in some loosely defined management role his father had created for him. Let me guess, he continued, swirling his champagne. You're here hoping for a handout. I'm here because I was invited. He laughed. My stepmother felt sorry for you. She said you'd probably show up wearing something from Goodwill, but we should be polite anyway. A familiar spark of anger flared inside me, but 10 years had taught me how to control it. Is that the story she's been telling everyone? Oh, there are several versions, Ethan said, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. Apparently, you couldn't keep a job. You blamed everyone else for your failures. Last I heard, you were practically homeless. So that was the narrative. For 10 years, my mother had been turning me into a cautionary tale, the ungrateful daughter who couldn't survive without her. Interesting, I said quietly. What's interesting? That she talks about me at all, I replied, considering she hasn't called me in 10 years. Ethan's smirk flickered for a moment. Whatever, just don't cause a scene. He glanced at the box in my hands. And don't expect anyone to be impressed by that. Everyone knows you can't afford anything decent. For a brief moment, I considered telling him everything, watching his expression collapse when he realized exactly who I had become. But not yet. Not like this. Excuse me, I said politely. I should congratulate the hosts. I walked past him toward the main table where my mother sat like a queen surveying her court. With each step, the box in my hands felt heavier. The conversation at the table stopped the moment I arrived. Graham Whitaker sat at Nicole's right, holding a glass of whiskey. Age had hardened his features. Deep lines framed his mouth, and the expression he gave me was identical to the one he wore the day he told me to leave his house. I placed the box gently on the table. Happy anniversary, Mom. Nicole glanced at the gift as if it might explode. Then she turned to the women sitting beside her, regular members of the country club, dressed in pearls and designer gowns, and laughed lightly. Well, look at that, she said. My daughter decided to show up after all. The women exchanged awkward smiles. That's a beautiful box, one of them said politely. Nicole didn't touch it. I'm sure it's very thoughtful. She emphasized the word with a tone that made it sound like a joke. Kendall was never particularly good with gifts, she continued, or money, or planning ahead for that matter. Graham snorted. Remember that Christmas she gave us those homemade photo frames? Soft laughter spread around the table. So what's inside? Another woman asked curiously. Nicole shrugged dramatically and pushed the box slightly away from her. Probably something from a clearance rack. That's about all she can manage these days. Her voice grew louder now, performing for the room. This is my daughter, everyone, the one I've told you about. She gestured toward me like a museum exhibit. She disappeared for years, never finished college properly. And now she shows up here with… She flicked a dismissive hand toward the box. Mom, don't call me that. Her eyes hardened instantly. I know exactly why you're here. You heard we were doing well and thought you could come back looking for money. Same as always. The entire room had gone silent. Dozens of people were watching. You're a freeloader, Kendall, she said coldly. You always have been. Graham pushed his chair back so hard it scraped across the marble floor. He grabbed the box from the table and shoved it back toward me. We don't need your cheap gift. His voice carried clearly across the ballroom. Take it and get out. And my mother gave a small, approving nod. He's right, Nicole Hayes said coldly. You're embarrassing yourself. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. 50 people stared at me, some with pity, some with curiosity. A few looked entertained, as if they were watching a scene from a play. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. The weight of every assumption, every rumor, every lie my mother had spent years spreading about me pressing down from every direction. Near the back of the room, an older woman shook her head slightly. A waiter froze mid-step, still holding a bottle of champagne. Somewhere behind me, someone whispered, "Poor girl." For a moment, my mind drifted backward. I saw my 16-year-old self standing in a hallway, being told there was no money for my education. I saw the 18-year-old version of me dragging 2 suitcases out of a house that was never really mine. I saw every version of myself who had been told I wasn't enough. Then something else rose inside me, something that had been building quietly for 12 years. Calm. I looked at my mother, at Graham Whitaker, and at the crowd of strangers who believed they knew my story. And I laughed. Not bitterly, not sarcastically, just a soft laugh of release. "What's so funny?" my mother snapped. "Nothing," I replied calmly, steadying the box in my hands. "I was just thinking about how you have absolutely no idea what you just refused." "Excuse me?" I began loosening the silver ribbon. "You wanted to know what's inside," I said. "Fine." I lifted the lid. "Let me show everyone." The room leaned forward collectively. Even Graham's sneer flickered with uncertainty. What happened next was something no one in that ballroom would ever forget. I placed the open box on the table so everyone could see. Inside, resting against dark navy velvet, was a single silver key. Beneath it lay a neatly folded document. I lifted the key first, letting the light catch the metal. "This," I said calmly, "is the key to a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. Upper West Side, doorman building, quiet neighborhood, excellent schools nearby." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Then I picked up the document and held it up. "This is the property deed," I continued. "Paid in full, no mortgage." I paused for a moment. "The apartment is valued at approximately $580,000. My mother's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She looked completely stunned. "I was going to give it to you." I looked directly at her. "A place you could move if you ever needed to start over. A gift from your daughter." The woman sitting beside my mother gasped. "You," she said. "Where did you get money like that?" Nicole's voice had lost its polished tone now. The performance was gone. "I earned it," I answered. "Doing what?" "I didn't ask anyone for money. I built a business, a successful one. I run my own company, Hayes Design Atelier. We specialize in high-end residential interior design." I let the words settle into the room. "You might have seen our work featured in Architectural Digest last spring." The whispers grew louder. Across the room, a man near the bar pulled out his phone and began searching. "That's impossible," Ethan Whitaker shouted from behind me. "You're lying." "Google it." Graham's face had turned a deep shade of red. My mother looked as if someone had slapped her. "Mom," I continued calmly, "you've spent years telling people I couldn't keep a job, that I was barely surviving, that I was practically homeless." I gestured toward the box. "Does this look like someone who's struggling?" No one answered. A crack had appeared in my mother's carefully crafted story, and I wasn't finished. The silence stretched until an older woman stepped forward. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. I recognized her immediately from the old photographs I had kept. Margaret Langford, one of my father's oldest friends. "Nicole," she said coolly, "you told me your daughter was unemployed, that she was living off other people's generosity, that she refused to return your calls." My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Mrs. Langford," I said politely, nodding. "Kendall, dear," she replied, her expression softening slightly. "It's good to see you again." She looked around the room. "And I'm glad to see you're doing well, despite what I was told." Murmurs spread quickly through the crowd. More phones appeared as people searched my company online, turning their screens toward one another. "She really is a designer," someone whispered. "There's an entire website." I turned back to my mother. "You never called me," I said quietly. "Not once in 10 years. So where exactly did you get all that information about my life?" Silence. "You didn't," I continued. "You made it up. You told people whatever version of the story made you look like the victim." "I was protecting our family's reputation," she said stiffly. "By lying about your daughter?" Margaret crossed her arms. "Nicole, is this true? You've been spreading false stories about your own child?" Graham grabbed my mother's arm. "Don't answer that." "Why not?" I said evenly. "What else does she have to hide?" The guests were watching now the way people watch a courtroom trial. I could see the shift happening in real time, doubt spreading through the room. "Since we're being honest," I continued, "let's talk about what really happened after my father died. About the insurance money. About where it actually went." My mother's face drained of color. Kendall, don't. Don't what? I asked calmly. Tell the truth? I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the edges worn from years of careful handling. This, I said, is a letter my father, Stephen Hayes, wrote before he died. Margaret's hand flew to her chest. Your father wrote you a letter? He did. I slowly unfolded the page, and I think everyone here should hear part of it. My mother lunged forward. Give me that! Graham grabbed her arm and held her back. I began reading. My dear Kendall, if you are reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. My voice remained steady, even though my chest tightened. I know your mother has her flaws. I know she doesn't always put you first. None of that is your fault, sweetheart. It never was. A woman near the front of the room quietly wiped her eyes. I've set aside money for you, I continued reading. Separate from anything your mother can access. Use it to build the life you deserve, and never let anyone convince you that you're not good enough. I lowered the letter. My father knew. I looked directly at my mother. He knew that if something happened to him, you wouldn't take care of me, so he made other arrangements. Stephen wrote that? Margaret whispered. Nicole, you told me he left nothing for Kendall, that the insurance barely covered the funeral. My mother said nothing. The insurance payout was over $260,000, I said quietly. I never saw a single dollar of it. It went into this house, Ethan's education, a new car, and a country club membership. The room erupted into murmurs. Graham leaned toward my mother, whispering urgently while she stared ahead like someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. For the first time in 12 years, she had no script. Let me pause here for just a second. How do you think my mother reacted when everything came out like that? Leave your guess in the comments. I'm curious to see who gets it right. And if this story resonates with you, hitting the like button really helps more people discover it. Now here's what happened next. My mother recovered faster than I expected. Tears suddenly filled her eyes, the same perfectly timed tears I had seen her summon countless times when she needed sympathy. Kendall, sweetheart. Her voice broke with flawless precision. I'm so sorry, my mother said, her voice trembling. I didn't understand before. I didn't realize how badly I hurt you. She reached toward the box. Let me fix this. We can start again. I'm your mother. Before her fingers could touch it, I pulled the box back. No. The word lingered in the air. What do you mean, no? She asked sharply. The tears vanished almost instantly, replaced by something far less convincing. I brought this gift for someone who deserved it, I said calmly. Someone who might actually want a real relationship with me. I closed the lid of the box with a quiet click. You're not that person. You can't do this to me, she snapped, her voice rising. Not in front of everyone. You did it first. The ballroom fell completely silent again. 5 minutes ago, you called me a freeloader in front of every person in this room, I continued. You told them I was useless, that I couldn't survive on my own, and you've been telling that story for 10 years. That's different. How? I tucked the box beneath my arm. You humiliated me publicly. You lied about me publicly. And now suddenly you want what I have. That's not how family works. Margaret Langford stepped a little closer, watching the exchange with quiet interest, and something that looked suspiciously like approval. To be honest, I went on, I came here hoping you had changed. I hoped maybe there was a version of you who wanted a daughter instead of someone to blame. My mother's polite mask finally shattered. Pure anger flashed in her eyes. You ungrateful little— I am grateful, I interrupted calmly. Grateful I learned early exactly who you are. I turned toward the door. This apartment will go to someone who actually loves me. Before I reached the exit, Graham Whitaker stepped in front of me. Now hold on, he said, his tone suddenly smoother, almost friendly, the voice of a businessman trying to salvage a collapsing deal. Let's not rush into anything. We're family. Families disagree sometimes. We're not family, I said evenly. You made that very clear 10 years ago. Things were said in the heat of the moment. You told me your house didn't support freeloaders. I met his eyes without hesitation. So I left and built my own life. Why are you upset now? Ethan Whitaker appeared beside his father. Look, he said awkwardly. I know we haven't always gotten along. He stopped, clearly searching for words he'd never had to use before. But this is ridiculous. You can't just walk away with a $500,000 apartment. I can do whatever I want with my money. Well, I mean, Ethan laughed nervously. Come on, we're basically siblings. We're strangers who shared a house for 2 years, I replied. And in that house, you got everything. I got a closet. Graham tried again. What if we discuss this like adults? Maybe there's some arrangement we can make. I'm not interested in arrangements. I stepped around them. Behind me, my mother had stood up. Mascara streaked faintly down her cheeks. Real tears now, perhaps. Or simply a more convincing performance. Kendall, her voice cracked. Kendall, please, I know I made mistakes. Just give me another chance. I paused at the doorway and turned back one last time. You had chances, Mom. 17 years of chances. And every single time, you chose yourself. I glanced around the room full of witnesses, the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the phones still raised in manicured hands. If you ever want a real relationship with me, I said quietly, one based on respect instead of what you can get from me, you know how to reach me. Then I walked out into the cool October night. The ballroom doors closed behind me like the final line of a chapter. Julian Cross was waiting when I got home. He didn't ask questions right away. He simply wrapped his arms around me and held me while the adrenaline slowly drained away. How do you feel? He asked eventually. I thought about it for a moment. Free? He smiled. That's a good answer. My phone started buzzing before I had even taken off my coat, and it didn't stop. 47 missed calls from my mother, 12 from Graham, 8 from Ethan, several other numbers I didn't recognize, probably guests from the party who had somehow found my contact information. Text messages flooded in. Kendall, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean any of it. You can't do this to your own mother. Please call me back. Julian watched my phone light up again and again. Are you going to answer any of those? Not tonight. I silenced the phone and placed it face down on the counter. Maybe not ever. We ordered takeout and ate on the couch while the Manhattan skyline shimmered through the windows. Every few minutes, my phone lit up again in my peripheral vision, a steady pulse of desperation that I no longer felt obligated to respond to. What happens now? Julian asked. I'm not sure, I admitted. I leaned against him, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. I told them the truth. What they do with it now is their problem. And the apartment? I smiled. I already know who I'm giving it to. For the first time in 12 years, the heavy weight I'd carried, the constant awareness that the people who were supposed to love me had rejected me, felt lighter. Maybe that feeling would never disappear completely, but that night, watching the city lights beside someone who chose me freely, it was enough, more than enough. The aftermath came gradually over the next week. Clara Bennett was the first to call. She sounded almost amused. You'll never believe what I heard. As it turned out, Margaret Langford had a very large social network. By Monday morning, the story of the anniversary party had spread through charity committees, social clubs, and country club dining rooms across half the region. Nicole tried to repair the damage, Clara told me. She claimed I had misunderstood everything. She insisted the letter was fake. She even said I had always been a difficult child. Did anyone believe her? I asked. Not after 3 guests admitted they Googled your company during the party. Clara laughed softly. Your website had nearly 1,500 visitors that night alone. The business consequences followed soon after. I learned that Graham had been negotiating a major contract for Whitaker Building Supply with a regional supplier. The supplier's CEO happened to be a longtime friend of Margaret Langford. After hearing about the anniversary party, the company requested more time to review the agreement. That extra time turned into weeks, and when the deal finally went through, the terms were significantly less favorable than before. Then came another surprise. Ethan's mother, Graham's first wife, heard about the situation through her own social circle. She called Ethan personally to express her deep disappointment in how he had treated his stepsister, and then she cut his monthly support payment in half. None of what happened afterward brought me any real joy. I didn't check my mother's social media to see if she was suffering, and I didn't sit around counting the ways karma might have balanced the scales. But there was a quiet sense of satisfaction in knowing the truth was finally out there. For years, my mother had controlled the story people heard about me. Now the story had corrected itself. When Clara Bennett asked whether I regretted any of it, my answer came easily. No, I told her. I only wish I had done it sooner. She laughed softly. Your father would be proud. I hoped she was right. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, I answered my mother's call one time, just once, for closure. Kendall. Her voice sounded hoarse, stripped of the polished confidence I was used to hearing. Thank you for answering. I almost didn't. There was a long pause. I understand, she said quietly. I waited. I want you to know, she continued after a shaky breath. I've been thinking about everything you said, about the choices I made. I know I wasn't the mother you needed. This was the moment where I was supposed to reassure her, tell her it was okay, offer forgiveness and start over. I didn't. What exactly do you regret, Mom? I asked. Silence filled the line. Because from where I'm standing, I continued, it sounds like you regret getting caught, not what you actually did. That's not... She stopped herself, then began again. When your father died, I was terrified, she admitted. I grew up with nothing. My own mother was abandoned with 3 kids and no money. I promised myself I'd never end up like that. So instead, I said quietly, you abandoned me. I didn't see it that way. I know that's the problem. I heard her crying then, not the carefully controlled tears she used in public, but the raw, uneven kind. I just wanted to feel safe, she whispered. I was so afraid of losing everything. I understand fear, I said gently. But being afraid doesn't give you the right to hurt the people who depend on you. Another pause. What can I do? She asked. How do I fix this? I don't know if you can. I took a slow breath. But if we're ever going to have any kind of relationship going forward, it has to be real. Equal. No manipulation. No stories about me to your friends. And no calling me when you want money or favors. Silence lingered for a moment. I understand, she finally said. I hope you do, Mom. I really do. Then I ended the call. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a boundary. 6 months later, I gave the apartment away. Not to my mother, to Clara Bennett. She stood in the empty living room, tears running freely down her face, the key clutched tightly in her hand as if it might disappear. Kendall, I can't possibly accept this. You can, I said, hugging her. You're the one who saved me. You kept Dad's promise when no one else did. This belongs to you. Clara had spent 30 years living in a tiny Boston apartment, paying off nursing school loans while working double shifts at the hospital. She deserved a home with sunlight, a doorman, and neighbors who brought cookies during the holidays. The feature in Architectural Digest brought 3 new high-profile clients to Hayes Design Atelier. My team grew from 4 designers to 7, and Julian Cross proposed one quiet Tuesday evening. No grand audience, no dramatic setting, just the 2 of us and a ring that had once belonged to his grandmother. I built a family, not the one I was born into, the one I chose. Clara, Julian, my college roommate who let me sleep on her floor during the hardest months. My first boss who believed in me long before I believed in myself. My mother called once a month after that. The conversations stayed short and careful, never going very deep. She never mentioned the apartment again. Graham's company eventually stabilized, and according to occasional rumors that reached me through mutual acquaintances, Ethan Whitaker finally found a real job, something in sales. Whether any of them had truly changed or had simply learned to hide their worst instincts better, I couldn't say. And honestly, it didn't matter anymore. For years I had waited for my mother to love me the way I needed, to choose me, to prove that I mattered. Eventually, I realized I had been asking the wrong question. The real question wasn't whether I deserved to be loved, it was whether she was capable of loving me at all. Sometimes, late at night, I write letters I'll never send. One of them is addressed to a 16-year-old girl standing in a hallway, being told she wasn't worth an $8,000 investment. Dear Kendall, I know you're scared right now. I know you're lying in that small room with the stained ceiling, wondering if everyone is right about you. Wondering if maybe you really are as worthless as they say. You're not. The people who should have protected you chose themselves instead. That was their failure, not yours. Their inability to love has nothing to do with your worth. You will survive this. More than that, you will build something beautiful from the ruins. It won't be easy. There will be nights when you cry yourself to sleep, and mornings when you're not sure you can keep going anyway. One day you will stand in a room full of people who believe the worst about you, and you will tell the truth without hesitation. You will walk away with your dignity and your heart intact. And you will finally understand something important. Their approval was never what you needed. What you needed was permission to believe in yourself. Your dad already gave you that. The rest is up to you. I close my journal and look out the window. The sun is rising over Manhattan, painting the skyline in soft shades of pink and gold. My father was right. I didn't rise in life because of the money my father set aside for me. I rose because of what he taught me long before he was gone. He showed me what real love looks like: patient, selfless, unconditional. That was the real inheritance he left behind. Not the money in a bank account, but the deep, unshakable belief that I am worthy of being loved well. I learned that from a man who has been gone for 12 years, and I carry that lesson with me every single day. That's my story. And what I hope people take from my story isn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It's about understanding your own worth, even when the people who were supposed to protect you fail to see it. For years, I believed something was wrong with me. When your own family treats you like a burden, it's easy to start believing the story they tell about you. I carried that weight for a long time. But eventually, I realized something important. Someone else's inability to love you properly does not define your value. My father believed in me long before I believed in myself. And sometimes, that one voice is enough to carry you through the hardest years of your life. If there's one lesson in all of this, it's this. You don't have to stay where you are constantly diminished. You don't have to beg for respect. And you don't have to prove your worth to people who have already decided not to see it. Build your life anyway. Surround yourself with people who choose you freely. Create the kind of family that grows from kindness, loyalty, and truth. Because the greatest success isn't making the people who doubted you regret it. It's learning that you never needed their approval in the first place. If this story meant something to you, I'd really love to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from, or share a moment in your life when you had to choose your own worth over someone else's expectations. I read as many comments as I can, and your stories truly matter here. If you believe more people need to hear messages like this, please take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who might need the reminder that they deserve respect and real love. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, family, and finding strength after betrayal, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Thank you for spending your time with me today. It means more than you know. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you remember this. Your worth is not decided by the people who failed to see it. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.